Welcome back to Startup Security Weekly. This is the Startup News section for today. Michael, you've prepared some outstanding stories, and I added a couple in here. Actually, we can talk about how I do these shows, and I've really kind of automated the way that I collect stories.
I got to get better at that.
I can help you with that. I had to write some software to help me do it. It turns out that the few hours, I don't know, 4 or 5 plus hours, saves me at least an hour a week now. So it was well worth my time. So
absolutely.
So
you got good value within the first 90 days, Paul.
I did. Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about the magic of momentum.
Yeah, so, you've pointed this out before. This is a story that ran on Medium, and more I'm starting to enjoy Medium and the people that are sharing their ideas on it.
Great website, yep.
Yeah, it's lots of voices. Actually, I'm going to start posting some of my stuff there. And by the way, what I'll point out is if you're into that and you start thinking about the content marketing side of it, what's kind of cool is a lot of the things that you find on Medium, when you get down to the bottom, they say, this originally ran on my other website. And hey, if you want to see more like this, come click on it. Or if you want this free whatever, come click here and get it. So keep that in mind, right? You can cycle your best stuff to Medium. You're just going to put it in front of more eyeballs, and that's where we've time to find some stuff. Here's what I liked. This particular article was talking about momentum, and it opened up, and it was great. It was talking about the number of startups that fail and how quickly things fail and the businesses that fail. But what it basically said was, yeah, fine. Let's not talk about failure. That's easy. Let's not talk about failing fast. That's also easy. Let's go to this. And this is the quote that really captured me in terms of this. I want to talk about why most of us fail. We quit before we achieve momentum. Now, what this brought back to me, I remember right about the time I was getting ready to go out on my own and start my first company, I had a guy sit me down and say, when you get to the point where you get home at night, you're exhausted, you start crying for no reason, you're about there. Like,
right.
when it seems like you don't even know how this is going to work, yeah, good luck, but don't give up. That's when it's going to work. And then it talked a little bit about how you got to struggle for it. So I go back to the story you opened with, and I wonder, if that company had been able to persist just a little longer, if they had struggled a little bit more or had figured some stuff out, how that would work for them a little bit better. And I don't know their specifics, and it's not important. It's just I think it's interesting because, in fact, this is not something I put in the show notes, but when I go work with people on the concept of transformation, change, what I always point out is there's 3 basic elements that we need to think about. There's the appetite. That's our desire. Do you want this? Oh, I totally want it. Yeah, I want it. And then we overlook capacity and structure. Capacity is your ability to do it. So it's simply, if you're already working 50 hours a week, you might not have the capacity, but forget the hours. The energy, the focus, the ability to do those types of things. How does that work? Where are you at? And the structure could be your processes, the way you're set up, but it could also be your culture. And we're going to talk about culture a little bit later. What's also interesting, and I've picked up a great book. It's called Unbeatable Mind. It was written by former Navy SEAL Commander Mark Divine. And for me, the book's really pulling a lot of ideas together. I've been really looking at mental management lately, but what I will tell you is it's absolutely fascinating to me how much we sabotage ourselves in our mind. And that's why when you were telling that story, I was asking you, how did you respond to it? And you responded, I think, in a really healthy way. You evaluated it, said, okay, so we got to make sure we're communicating well. We're going to give stuff away. We're going to prove it. We're going to build a community, which we'll talk about next. Mm-hmm. But it's fascinating how many people I talk to that run companies, and they're always focusing on the downside. They're always feeling like they just got kicked in the gut. And it's natural, but man, we got to push through that. So, what are some of your thoughts on this for momentum? They gave some advice I think is good, but I'm kind of curious your take on it.
Well, it's interesting, Michael. My sharing on this topic is kind of interesting. I've always felt like throughout my career that I kind of suck at. Well, no, I do suck at time management and balancing work, life, and all that stuff. And I've found historically, like if I were to chart it out, that when my wife's kind of ticked at me for not spending enough time, and like when my friends and family are kind of like text me like, where the hell you been kind of thing. And when that happened, and your personal hygiene, I think is another like factor in there too. Like if you kind of like They're like, wow, I kind of haven't trimmed my fingernails in a while either. Like when you're at that point, like usually on the cusp of that, like you're on something great in your career or your business. that's, and there's no science behind that, but that's kind of speaks to the momentum, like you're on that mountain, right? And then like, yeah, like at that cusp thing you start picking up momentum and you're like, wow, I think I just accomplished something like really great and overcame some hurdles. And then you can take a little bit of time to sort of recover from that because you got over some of those hurdles. Not that it's any less work, but I think it's less taxing on you, and your personal hygiene starts to improve, and your wife's not ticked off at you anymore, and you kind of go in those fits and starts, right?
Yeah, and look, I think you laid it out well. And I was laughing, and I was kind of glad the video wasn't on me at the time because that's actually been my experience the last couple of weeks. I've had a couple of days where I'm like, I didn't take a shower today.
Right.
What the hell happened? But it's I had a friend reach out to me yesterday, and I was like, I'm putting in long days right now, but I'm happy. I've got that energy. And here's the thing, and it's funny, I incorporated this into the training program, and I'm so glad I did. You set an intention. You got to simplify it, and you got to be really clear on an intention. I'll tell you right now, in the first cohort, the people who went through an intention setting exercise with me at the beginning of the training stayed with the best, got the most out of it, and showed the most growth. The people who didn't struggled more. They got value or whatever, but intention setting is really important. And then it's a little bit each day. So one of the things I started looking at from leadership, people always like to ask me about what I think a leader is. And so what I started talking about is, for yourself, a leader's better today because of what they did yesterday. And what they do today is going to set up for that better tomorrow. So what I started realizing is that exceptional leaders elevate the people around them. And what I started looking at to measure success on a day isn't how much I got done, isn't necessarily how I feel at the end of the day, because sometimes that's more an emotional. And if I had like a bad moment, I could color the whole day bad. I simply look at it and say, was I better today than I was yesterday? Cool. Did I do the things today to set me up to be better tomorrow? Yep. And if somebody came into my contact today, will they be better tomorrow because of the time they spent with me today? If I can answer yes to all three of those questions, that's progress. And if you do that enough days in a row, it's momentum. I've been practicing that specific mantra now for about 10 weeks. Paul, we wouldn't even have enough time on the podcast for me to tell you how many awesome things have happened as a result of that.
Nice.
Just that mantra every day, every single day. So even the days where I don't feel like I got a lot done, I'll stop and I'll be like, hold on though. I figured this out. I solved this problem. I talked to these people. I got this feedback. All right, it was a good day. We're good. Tomorrow, pick it up again. Hit it hard. So I think it's good. I think they put out some good stuff in this. Now, let's look at this from the perspective. So we just talked startup perspective. I think if you're a buyer, this is one of those things that I'm interested in. And you talked about something I thought that was interesting already, and it kind of maybe feeds into our next story about communities. But when you get to share pieces to this, so you're giving some of your stuff away, I'm giving some of my stuff away. I don't know about you, man. I love those conversations, and sometimes they help me understand better what's going on. They help me shape that intention a little bit. Or I can say to them, I'm not really sure how to explain this to you. And they'll go, oh, here, we'll hop on a call. And you get to the end of the call, and 20 minutes later, you're like, oh, that's a much better way. Okay, cool. And so what I think is if you're in that role where you're not yet the startup, but you don't want people with good technology or good solutions to go by the wayside, give them your time. Let them explain stuff to you, and then help them shape what that looks like. Help them build that momentum. Give them that encouragement and say, look, man, I'm not a buyer today. I don't have the budget, whatever. But I like what you're doing. What can I do to help you? What do you think from a buyer's perspective? What else would you look at to help someone in that startup get some of that momentum going?
Yeah, I think being able to do a trial and give feedback and being upfront, being like, look, either we don't have the budget or, we don't have this or we don't have the other thing. But working with the product and giving honest feedback is always helpful. I also think that I got to be careful how I phrase this, is because it's kind of like competitive intelligence. But let's say you go to someone, let's step outside of security for a moment, right? I've got this new, cutter lighter for my cigar, right? And you come to me, Michael, with your cutter and lighter idea. And I'm like, that's interesting, but I got one that I really like, or maybe one that I don't like. Can go either way. And I tell you, Michael, here's what I like about my cutter and lighter. Here are the good things, here are the bad
Yeah.
things, here's where it may have gone wrong. And then I got this other one, like, here's the positive minuses of that one, and here's, its approach. I was just on a customer call today, and just stating the facts without opinion, which I could genuinely tell that this person was doing, is super helpful. And I'm not asking them like, hey, exactly how does that, like, can you send me the source code to that product? Like, no. Like, don't mix competitive intelligence with the, the shady side of it. But tell me what you thought about their approach. How did it work? What did it do well? What didn't it do well? We'll tell you the same things about our product as well.
Yeah, and let me add a dimension to that real quick.
Yeah.
Because what I love asking, and this is one of the things we talk about with frameworks, always ask about their situations and conditions. Ask about their context. So they say, oh, I really love this thing. Don't just go, oh, okay, I got to go build one of those things. Say, cool. So help me understand why that's helping you. Give me more about your situation. But what I love is when you let them start talking about their situations, you be like, oh, wait, I think I got an approach to that. Just share it, blurt it out, watch their reaction to it. Okay, cool. So that's probably not going to work for you. Cool. And then just remember, right, go talk to 5 people, 10 people. Like, one person does not a trend make. Yeah. But I'll tell you, it might lift your enthusiasm on a day when you need it. And that's really cool. All right, investors. I think an investor can use this as a litmus test. Tell me about your momentum. Tell me about your mindset. Tell me about your intention. Tell me how you're supporting that intention. I'm probably not going to ask them the last time they showered or, did you use deodorant today? But from an investor, I think I've worked with a lot of investors. They always tell me team's important, but they want to see the product. They want to see the plan. They want to see the pitch. If you're early in the stage and you don't really have an investor yet, but you think you might need one, to me, that's a question I might start asking. What do you think? How does this fit from an investor's perspective?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it comes down to when you're hearing a pitch as an investor, trying to understand where the person's coming from, what kind of person they are, how they deal with challenges. And some questions are, I think, specifically asked during the pitch just to see how the person will deal with a challenge. So I definitely think that's part of it. I don't think that's the majority of it, but I certainly think it plays to an investor.
All right. So next story: foster online trust, build a community. This came out of I think it's McKinsey. I grabbed it from. This is strategy plus business. I enjoy their stuff. So we're talking about sources and places to look for things. I don't grab all of their stuff, but I do find a lot of it is pretty well thought out, and it's pretty well distilled and pretty well written. So what they did was they gave an example of a ride sharing. In fact, this is what I liked. Think about the way they opened it up. They're talking about 2006, 3 business school classmates in France wanted to start a ride sharing service, not an Uber, not a Lyft, a ride sharing service. And it started out where it said the reaction they heard the most was, no way this will work. People are never going to step into a stranger's car. By the way, it took me the longest time to get over that with Uber, just so we're clear. So, and that's because even though it says back in the 60s and 70s, hitchhiking was accepted, I was born in the 70s and it was kind of drilled in my head, you do not get in a stranger's car. But what they did was they built a community. And so they've got some stuff on it. Here's what really drew me to this, though. It said, if you want to have trust, you got to build a community. And so what kind of really appealed to me about that was, well, we're in the security space. We need trust. Oh, and we need a community. And so what I kind of looked at was, well, so trust and community is important if you're a startup. It's important if you've got the startup mindset and you're in the enterprise. If you're a security startup, then this is your imperative. You almost have to go build that. And so again, let me pay you an accolade. You're doing that. You're giving away part of your code. You've been giving back to this community for over a decade, and you continue, and you're expanding and accelerating that. Yeah, there you go, man. That's really awesome.
I think a lot of people and a lot of companies make the mistake of saying, well, we want to increase buyer trust, which is going to increase sales. We want to gain traction. We want to gain momentum. So we're going to build a community.
Right.
But they've never really defined what it is the organization is going to share, what are the users are going to share, and what's the trade-off. How do people in the community benefit by sharing? And I've run into this a lot. And I think if it's done right, I'm a huge believer in specifically, so I'm going to relate this directly to security, right? In security technology, it's something that has a mixed rate of success. I build a product, I let people extend it in some way, and then people can share those extensions. And that can happen in different ways. And I think that I've seen it fail a lot. I've seen a lot of organizations not want to do that, not want to let users be able to share, essentially. The company wants more control. And I think
I think
the argument I've heard, Michael, is, well, if we build this community and people start like doing their own stuff with it, like let's say in the car example, like, well, people, they use all their own cars. Well, maybe that means that we can't provide a good enough car, so people have to use their own and develop their own routes. Like we should just be a taxi cab service, and we're going to provide all the cars. And I think over time we've seen it where the communities flourish, right? But the tricky part is to make sure that people have enough incentive to share and are getting value back from that community.
Yeah.
That's a tricky thing to build.
Well, yeah, and the other part to it too, and I thought you were going to go this direction, is when the scarcity mindset kicks in. Wait, you want me to build a community and be transparent and open about the things that I'm doing? Well, won't people rip me off? Won't they do it without me? Doesn't that mean I'll sell less? And the short answer to that every single time is no. You look, I don't know where I picked this up. This was an abiding part of my entire security career. I argued this in the 90s. There are three basic groups of people: the people that will never do anything with you, the people that will always do everything with you, and then the ones on the fence. Mm-hmm. And the best thing you can do is get the people on the fence the information they need to make the right decision for them. And the right decision for them may not be working with you. But if you can help them do what they're trying to do better, there's a better than likely chance that they'll remember you for it. I'll tell you what also happened. So here, they gave 6 ideas, and it's laid out pretty well in this document. So go read it, but it's got to be declared, which means you can't just come in with an anonymity. By the way, I think that's one of the things security needs to work on. You rate stuff, you need to be engaged, but then here's the ones I think matter. It's got to be active, moderated, and social. So this is going to take energy. This can take a lot of energy, which means you can be pretty focused on it. But here's what I find as you do this. You're going to get those insights. You're going to find out what people actually care about. But what I really like about it is you get people that are at least interested in what you're doing, but they're potentially vested in your success, but they're not as close to it as you are. So when you come out to them, you can say, hey, I'm looking at A or B. Does somebody want to talk about this? I find somebody's always willing to talk to you about that. Now, are you going to give them a little something extra in return? I would hope so, but I don't know that you're required to. But trust me, man, if you give people the stuff and you're in that community and you're promoting the good stuff, I don't think we do this stuff in security, you're going to learn so much. It's where do you pivot? Where do you focus? You're going to gain that. And from a business perspective, when we're talking about momentum, we're talking about how to communicate. If you've given back and you've created a community and you're paying attention and you're engaged, they're going to help you build your momentum. They're going to help you get the word out, and they're going to help you learn on what you need to say and how to say it and why it matters. That's invaluable to me. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think it does tie back to like how much you share, how much you make open. And it's kind of interesting. Some software that I wrote recently interfaces with APIs, and I look at other people who have written code, and I borrow and use their libraries, and then I have my own application. And once I do that, I'm stuck using your solution. And that's probably, that could be a good thing, right? Usually it's a good thing. It could be a bad thing, especially if that company goes belly up. But the reason they're making it open is so that people rely on it and keep using it and share in the community. So I think that's part of community is, technical term API, right? But allowing people to hook their stuff to your stuff and building a community around that. I think it's important. It can be tricky to pull off. I get that. I get it. But I think it speaks to this article and also speaks to the previous one about momentum.
Yeah. So again, I want to actively make sure we consider some of these perspectives. As a buyer, I actually look at communities. Now, if you put up a lot of barriers for me to get into it, a lot of barriers, I'm not interested. So, even though I like validating who I'm talking to and stuff, I'm okay if you spend a little time and give me some stuff for free. But I like that as a buyer. It makes me a lot more comfortable. And I think it's the same thing as an investor. I think you can get a flavor of the organization better by it. So I don't see the downsides that I see to building a community is, as you pointed out, you're in it for the wrong reasons. You got the scarcity mindset, or you don't fully appreciate just how much effort it's going to take to do it. And you're expecting, I said the word community. Let's go. Bring in the orders. It's not going to work that way. Mm-hmm. All right. How would you describe your company culture?
Um, Young. I don't want to say immature because that could imply different things, but I would say, yeah, young and immature. I certainly think that looking at this article, like nimble and ready to pivot, I think we've done a good job of that. And I think it's interesting, Michael, to speak to that one point in the beginning. I think when you first kind of come together, you're kind of holding on to your values and beliefs and like, this is what we should do. And then however we got to this point very quickly, we said, well, we're all going to work together. So we're going to be nimble and pivot. We're going to listen to each other. And now it's kind of interesting, Michael. We all do that. And we may say things that we know, like, I know this direction, like you don't always agree with it, but let's just explore it. And now we're just kind of more open to making changes and seeing what works. And I think, obviously trying to get sales is driving that. But that's the kind of, I would describe that how our corporate culture, is now, is that no one's afraid to make a suggestion and no one's afraid to take a new direction or suggest a new direction, which I think is super important. And I find when you first start out, it usually doesn't start out that way. And you have to set the precedent that you need to be able to suggest anything and try anything and work together and be open to new ideas.
No, yeah, I like it. I mean, we're at a place where you can't hide it. I mean, I don't know about you, but there's a lot of companies, if I'm evaluating working with them or just trying to understand them better, I'll go to Glassdoor. I'll look for other stuff. I'll read the reviews online. You can't hide it. And although sometimes I bristle when I see people say culture eats strategy for breakfast, I'm like, I don't think strategy is a good breakfast. Right? Don't you supposed to eat Wheaties or something? But the thing I look at is your culture does matter. And I'm starting more and more insecurity to see there's a lot of people that are kind of stuck in their culture. So, what I like that you're describing too is there's a lot of times when you get to be a startup, you can be a little more hip, or you can be a little more irreverent, or you can be a little more jocular. And that's fine. Like I don't mean to say that's cool as in like that's hip and cool. That's not a bad thing. What I like though is what you focused on is, but we embrace change. We embrace challenge. We're not yes people. We're willing to look at that. What I thought this article pointed out that was kind of interesting to me was they cited Google, they cited Apple. They said, the companies that if you ask in the tech world that are known for their culture, they tend to produce products that people like and they tend to charge a premium for them. And I think that that's an interesting thing. And I think we're going to keep paying attention to that because if you are that good place to work or you're that place that does pivot, that embraces change, that doesn't take things personally.
That takes headphone jacks out of new model phones. or prices your phone above $700, Google.
Well, and did you see that Google actually made specific one of the features is 3.5 millimeter jack? They didn't even. They're like, this is a selling feature for us. So no, I thought it's interesting. So let me point out a couple of things I thought. I kind of foreshadowed. I have what I call the 5 foundational elements. I'm going to make all of them short videos available on my website sometime in the future. And what's neat is some of those kind of come into this. So here's some stuff I liked out of this. You're relying on a structure. The importance for that is that structure ultimately is what lets you get to substance. It lets you what brings people together. You're coming together to solve problems. You're always looking at connecting people. You're prioritizing your work. You're aligning your efforts, and you're focusing on people, both internally and externally. If you can do those things consistently, you've got a good culture. Now, what I'll tell you is as I've been working with both, and I see this in startups, I see this in large enterprises, the top 3 challenges in corporations today are alignment, budget, and prioritization. That's where people are really getting stuck and where they're struggling, and that's where we got a lot of opportunities to it. And again, all I would say here is this to me just kind of matters. Like if I'm an investor, I'm going to be curious what your culture looks like. But as a buyer, I'm actually more curious how your culture operates. And then, keep in mind as a buyer, sometimes when you're buying into a company that's offering you a compelling product and has a good culture, you might get some of that culture to rub off on you. And that's a real net benefit.
Let's talk about telling stories.
It wouldn't be an episode if we didn't tell stories, right? All right, so let me do this. I like to ask people a question, and I'm not going to put you on the spot either. But I always like to say to people, if we're going to tell stories, story has to have three elements. What are the three elements? After an uncomfortable pause, people go beginning, middle, end. That is.
No, you said this before.
Yeah. So do you remember?
I don't remember.
Character, conflict, resolution.
Right.
And the idea of the characters is you got to give me the emotion. What I see in tech a lot, and so this maybe fits into the way we try to do communities. This might fit in the way we do momentum. We look at it and I say, I will give you a chronological listing of facts. We'll use facts lightly. A chronological listing of events, of factual items or statements, and that's my story. No, that's not a story. A story is you have emotion. A story is there's some sort of a conflict. And conflict, we have a negative take on conflict, but conflict by itself is not negative. And then you have a resolution. So, for example, when we're talking about riding that roller coaster, there are nights that, as a business owner, you don't sleep. You toss and turn. There are days you are riding the high. There's days you're doing both within a 12-hour span. That's part of running a business. And when you can tell that part of the story and connect to it and reveal some of your own struggles and some of your own challenges and your moments of self-doubt, then you can say, but I got to the other side. Now, where this fits into the enterprise, or when you're in a startup, people don't go to Home Depot or wherever to buy a drill because they love drills and check out my drill collection and they got this new worm drive, I just had to have it. I'm sure there are some people who do that, but most people, when they run to Home Depot to buy a drill or a drill driver, it's because they got to put a lot of screws in the wall, or they got to put a hole in the wall because they got to run some cable or whatever else. They don't want the drill, they want the hole in the wall. And they're either going to buy it based on budget or features, but they're going to do whatever they do, but they're not really buying the drill, they're buying the outcome of the drill. So when we're telling stories, we've got to keep that in mind with people. What's the outcome? How am I better by working with you? And a lot of times in security, we talk about sucks the least. I would argue what we want to do is go back and show people, here's your current situation. This is what I call the leadership roadmap, right? 3 things. Articulate your current situation. Paint for me the picture of a better tomorrow. I don't mean a vision statement. I mean tomorrow. And when I say paint a picture, I mean bring me the emotion into it. How will I feel tomorrow? Now, I don't mean today is bad. But if you've leveled with me on what today is and you watch me nod my head, yeah, no, you got it, Paul. That's my situation. Cool. Okay, so what's tomorrow look like for me if I work with you? Or what do you see as possible? And what's my role in that? What's my purpose? Is that something I want? If it's something I want, then show me how I'm going to get there. And that's your product. Your product is the pathway. Show me how I'm going to get there. Let me know there might be some struggles or some discomfort, but then that's where the story comes in. Tell me about Sally, who had the same concerns. And you know what? She was working overtime. She missed the date night. Things were really kind of frustrating. She wasn't seeing her kids as much as she wanted to. But then she put your product in, and I'll tell you, she was a little nervous because you're not Cisco, you're not IBM. And they couldn't spend as much, so they did a limited pilot. But guess what? It worked. Here we are 6 months later. Everything's going great. Everybody's happy with her. They like it, right? That type of stuff. So to me, those are the stories. Are you starting to capture some of those stories in your business?
I do. I don't think I tell the story very well, though. I was actually just making some notes that I need to tell the story better.
Yeah, I mean, where you're already doing something that I think is pretty good is when you let somebody do a trial or they're trying some piece of it and you're talking to them. What I always recommend is just ask them a little bit more about their situation. Ask them about their emotion. So you're really busy. Okay, what's that like? Are you busy or productive? I'm just busy. Do you want to be productive? By the way, that's the answer I get the most. I don't know. Okay, well, what's going on? Is it your boss? Is it somebody else? Is it you? And let them just kind of talk about it and say, all right, well, listen, my stuff's going to guide you through some of this step by step. I'm going to free you up, right? I mean, your product ostensibly is going to reduce my workload on false positives and what I call the risk catnip, and you're going to put me in a position where I'm focusing on the stuff that matters better, faster, in context.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly our story, right? Like it used to take us a week or so to do, a threat hunting exercise. We developed these techniques and made software. Now it takes us 4 or 5 hours to do the same amount of work.
So if I might offer you some thoughts, when I would come across that dinner, I found one of your customers, I would say, okay, Did you know before Paul came along how long it took you on average? And I bet you most people don't.
No.
And I say, okay, now do you know what that was costing you? And most people don't. So we can teach them how to calculate the value of an hour and a value of their time, number one. But then I started asking them, what were your missed opportunities? When you got to the end of that, were you focusing on the most important stuff? Were you advancing security, right? Go back to the mantra. Were you better tomorrow because of that time you spent today? And did the stuff you do today set you up for a better tomorrow? And most people, frankly, are going to answer that as I don't think so.
It's interesting. Most people aren't time. It's missed the opportunity, right? It's, hey, we had a red team exercise and we didn't detect them, right? That was a missed opportunity there that you could have spent protecting it.
So take that to the next step. When you didn't detect them, what happened? Did somebody lose confidence in you? Did they start questioning you? Did you feel embarrassed? Were you concerned about your job? Did your stress go up? Did you start drinking a little more? I probably would stray away from some of that. But they're valid questions to have to say, well, what if I could show you how instead of spending a week on something, I'm knocking it down to a half day, and I'm going to make sure you focus on the right stuff faster, and you're going to be able to prove your results to somebody else. Oh. Well, now you're starting to capture. You say, look, I know what it's like. You start stress eating. It wasn't going to be any soda today. You had 2 Mountain Dews. You were going to end work at 4 o'clock and go watch your kid's soccer game, and at 7 o'clock you're still there. You're trying to eat healthier, but screw it. You ordered the pizza with extra pepperoni on it, right? Look, dude, we've been there. I get that. I know what that feels like. And I can help, right? And so you got to make those kind of connections with it. They talk here about wanting to have a failure story, a good example story, and the inspiration story. A failure story is okay. The reason they like them is because it shows that you're authentic. It shows that you're real, that you're not always perfect. Now, I will tell you this. If you're in the enterprise and you're using the startup mindset and you're in security, you need to have a failure story. And I'll give you a quick example. I went to a conference a couple years ago, and I had a person, right, and look, if you watched me in the other shows, I absolutely disdain picking on people. I think it's a horrible habit to get into. But this person stands up, and they're telling me how they go around every night, and every time there's a violation of the clean desk policy, they put pink stickies all over it, and they're there to remind everybody at night just how much they screwed up. And she said, and this is no surprise, but she said, so nobody likes me, and everybody's angry, and nothing has ever changed, and what do I do about it? And all I asked her was, have you always followed the policy perfect from day one? And I was impressed because she said no. I said, cool, what was your aha moment? What changed for you? When did you figure it out? And a lot of us in security, we overhardened the box at some point. We blew up a router. We made a mistake. We didn't back up the config. Something got stolen. We lost it, right? So we had some lesson where it was like, okay, I got to do stuff differently here. And so where that failure story comes in is it's what woke you up? What was your aha? And why did it change you? How did it change you? How did you feel? What were you afraid of beforehand? And where do you go from here? That, if you're in the enterprise, you had better have that story, because if you come across as the holier than thou, I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in security, I'm never wrong, you're all stupid, you need to start doing what I'm saying, guys, I can make it really easy when nobody's following you. Same thing if you're a startup. But so the failure story gives it a human dimension and a human element, but what I would do almost is call it my aha moment. Give me your aha moment, that's solid. Otherwise, good examples always work. And inspiration. If you can show people how you can change the industry, you can change their performance, you can give them that better tomorrow. In fact, if you want to do the inspiration, you've got to show them how you're going to solve a problem and help them elevate their performance. They're going to reach an aspiration that they have at the same time. Boom, go get that story. I'm all over it.
Nice. I think my sales deck and pitch gets updated every week when we have the show, Michael. It's great.
That's good, man. I mean, obviously, this is where I've spent the last 15 years focusing on it. And what I'll say, it's interesting is I made some fundamental mistakes myself looking at some of these stories with Straight Talk. Look, you've heard me say all day long, lead with benefits, not features. I led with features, not benefits. Once I flipped it, holy cow, total difference. But the other part to it, too, is a lot of people go, oh, it's Straight Talk, so it's all about communication. No. What I finally learned to explain to people is it's about taking friction out of communication so that you can bring people together and make better decisions. When I can say that, people are like, oh, well, will it help me communicate better? Absolutely. But that's the byproduct of focusing on the right stuff by taking friction out of your communication, getting rid of the jargon, and getting to straight talk. The only way I learned that was I have been doing this now for a long time. I made a lot of mistakes. You talk about updating your pitch deck every week. I've totally done that too. All right, we talked about funding a little bit. I put this up mostly because I was just kind of curious your take on it. So if people are paying attention, earlier part of this year, government in the United States loosened it up. So it used to be if you wanted to be an investor, you had to be certified by the SEC. And I'm going to go off memory here. I should have looked it up. You had to have $1 million in assets total, or you had to earn $200,000 a year as an individual, $300,000 a year as a married couple for 3 years in a row. If you were able to do that, you could be certified as an SEC qualified investor, which means that you could join an angel group, you could join a funding group, you could participate in funding rounds. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do. Well, post our what we call the Great Recession, and I'll just leave it at that. They came along and said, why don't we do crowdfunding? Why not just let people throw their cash at it, and they'll take smaller amounts, and we'll kind of make it work. And so what they've kind of come back and said, now, to be fair, the article that we linked to is now 2 months old, so I suspect the data might shift and change. But they kind of came back and said, yeah, that's not really working out the way we thought it would. Like, we thought this would be just crushing it, and it's not. And so I kind of looked at it and said, well, hey, I wonder if we should actively pursue that as a security model, right? So that's my first question. And then what I also looked at is I said, but Kickstarter's kicking ass left and right, no pun intended. So are we already doing it, and we're looking at the wrong? So I was just kind of curious what you thought about this. Is this something that, from a security perspective, we should be paying more attention to?
Well, I think I would look at it in the opposite realm. I think when we look at crowdfunding, it's interesting that if you're going to give someone a lot of money, you have to do the paperwork, or you should do the paperwork, right? But what I see in terms of security really in the crowdfunding is the opposite. I gave my $50 to someone that never came up with a product, and I got stiffed my $50. So I think that not only do we need to qualify investors, but I think we need to qualify the business owners more so on the crowdfunded side than on the regular investment side, because the horror stories I hear from the security end of it, and look, it's not everyone that's doing it, right? But there are a lot of cases where the person never delivers, right?
So it's interesting. So what I'm hearing from you is, as a community, it hasn't necessarily built up. And so where Kickstarter is starting to work is, if you've been on Kickstarter, you get rated, you get reviewed, you get a chance to make that case. And so when people say, hey, we just flipped the switch on this a couple months ago, and here we are a couple months later, and nothing's happened, you raised a really good point. We haven't built that community. We haven't built that trust. Here's what I would say. This is something I want to keep paying attention to. I think it's interesting from a perspective of companies that are trying to get that right. Go back to our early part of the discussion. You're trying to get momentum. Maybe you're giving some stuff away. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're trying to find a way to make it all work or whatever. I think there might be an interesting pathway here for some companies to get that. But as you pointed out, there needs to be some vetting process or some level of transparency, trust built into it. And so what we're seeing is we've got a new funding model and a funding source. It's just going to take some time for us to work out of those pieces, I think.
Absolutely.
That's a good point.
I think we covered our journeys, Michael, pretty well.
Yeah, man. I think the
nature of us talking, not having spoken about our journeys in a couple of weeks, made us talk about our journeys more, which I think is good.
Yeah. And I think it's good, and I'm always happy to put it together. The only thing that I'll add to it is the thing that I thought was kind of fascinating for me is I keep getting more focused. So if you had asked me 5 or 6 or 7 weeks ago, I would tell you, well, I can do this and I can do this, and I might have these other classes, and I might do this. Now that I've run that first cohort and I've interacted with people and I've watched, I mean, I can tell you there's nothing more exciting when somebody calls you excited to tell you how they just solved a huge problem at work. And I even like when they say, at home, my wife's a lot happier and I'm communicating better, and, it's all great stuff. But I'm actually down to now just 3 things. That's it. We just do 3 things. We offer people training. We offer them some advisory services on how to implement it and actually go on site and work with them and build it, and some coaching. That's it. I am down from, if you look at my post that's behind me a little bit, you can see, remember it used to be like 50, then I got it down to like 9. Nice. 3. I'm just doing 3 things. And And that's creating so much opportunity. Remember, there are 3 primary colors. Crayola's got a box of 64, 168, 170 something now. Pantone's got millions of colors. I'm doing 3 things, and I'm going to work on doing them remarkably. So yeah, the journey's going awesome.
I had one other article in there, the top 10 branding mistakes entrepreneurs make. These are branding mistakes that everyone makes. No, well, not everyone, but I've seen these very, very commonly mistakes made all the time. I know that English doesn't make sense, but it's the end of the week. Basically, getting creative with your company name. I've seen that can work against you. Forgetting that you are the brand, no matter what you sell.
Well, let me add one to that too.
The whole list, Michael. I'm like,
yeah,
they nailed it. They nailed it on almost everyone. Probably 9 out of 10.
With you, and let me just add: not only getting creative with your company name, getting creative with your products. I mean, I find myself, it's we call it in the writing world murdering. You need to be willing to murder your darlings. You've got something, you're artful, you crafted it, you're in love with it. Man, I had some stuff that I was putting out there, and I would say it to potential clients. They're like, yeah, I don't care. Here's what I want. Paul, they would describe the exact same thing, but they would use totally different words. And I go, okay, well, we'll go with your words. Yeah, much, much better. This is a freaking awesome list. Which one? So out of the 10, which one do you think is the most important?
I would say, hold on, where was it? That not confirming that a need for your product or service truly exists. Yeah, that's the most important one. And like I said, I've experienced firsthand making all of these mistakes, not being realistic about your competition, consistent communication, the right team members to represent your brand. 10, right?
Not making something you want to do. I'm looking at it. I agree with you. I also would put high value in number 9. Not making choices about your brand's offerings and benefits. If you try to be everything to everybody, you will be nothing to anyone. You have got to talk about what you do and why you're better at it and who you serve and how they're better for it. And I see a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah, great article. Well, with that, Michael, thank you for this edition of Startup Security Weekly. I want to also thank everyone for listening and watching, and we'll see everyone next week on Startup Security Weekly.